So here's the question of the day. So when you create something and you love it, and then you decide that you have to recreate it, make more of it, but you struggle to get exactly what you got the first time or something even remotely close, what do you do when you love something? Well, I have a story to tell you, but before I tell you the story, in case you don't know, I am Melissa Kerman, and my business is Melissa's Crafting Treehouse. I've been crafting for over 16 years, paper crafting that is, crafting generally my whole life. And I love to share and teach, and so welcome, thank you for being here. So the story, the question, what do you do when you create something that you love and you can't seem to recreate exactly what you did? Well, this happened to me just recently, and so I want you to learn from my experience and just get you to kind of think, what do you do in this situation? So I created a project for a presentation I was doing back in November, the pre-on-stage event, and I made it, I loved it. I made 3 versions of it. And just fell in love. And so I decided, okay, well, I'm going to make several of these. And I cut for maybe 10 of each of the projects. And then I went to go recreate it because I thought maybe I would use them for swaps or to send them to people. And it just didn't turn out the same way the second and third and fourth time. So what I did in that situation, particularly because I love it, now if I hadn't loved it, then I might have just been, okay, one off. Those 3 projects are great, move on. But because I loved it and because I love to share the craft, and I decided that I had to figure out what the problem was. So I experimented and I played, and this is what I do. It allows me also to, by experimenting and playing and figuring out what are the variables that determine a given outcome when I'm crafting, so that I can recreate it and teach. So if it makes me think of like a restaurant. The mark of a good restaurant is you go, and if you don't get the same favorite dish each time, because they make it different every time, then it's no good, right? So you want to be able to recreate the project, and when I teach, I want you guys to be able to recreate it. Now, I don't mean copy it exactly. I mean just create a result that you'll be happy with. So I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about what I did, what worked, what didn't, and what I discovered in the process of showing you the project today. So as you can see, I'm going straight into the project for the day and the featured products that I'm using. Hello, people who are joining. Thank you for being here, or whether you're watching on the replay or live, thank you so much for being here. So I'm using this product it was in the holiday catalog, but it carried over, so it's still available. It's probably the best deal in the entire catalog, creatively speaking, and they are decorative masks. So it comes in a set of 4. This is just one of them. It's the basic pattern decorative masks. Now, they aren't in the big catalog, so just in case you might want to find them, it's item number 150697. But if you look up masks on the Stampin' Up! Website, you should find them. So this is one of the patterns. It's actually the most boring pattern. I didn't actually use it in my project. The next is this one, and I need a piece of paper so you guys can see it maybe a little bit better. Don't have a piece of paper. Anyway, visualize. You'll see it on the project as well. This is another one. I love this one. This is sort of the tree branches. They're the tree trunks or whatever, birch trees. And then the last one is the one I'm going to actually demonstrate with, so I'll show you when I face the camera down. The other product that I'm using is the Pigment sprinkles, which come in a little box like this. There's 6 little bottles, and you'll see those again when I point the camera down. So there are 6 different colors. They're Stampin' Up! Colors, which is an improvement over the old Pigment sprinkles that Stampin' Up! Was selling last year, because then we can coordinate the colors really easily and well. So I love that. So without further ado, I'm going to face the camera down and show you what I learned. And if you feel so inclined, leave a comment and let me know, and let us all know, what do you do when you have created a project, you want to make it again, and it just doesn't turn out the second time? Do you can it, or do you take a deep dive in figuring out what happened? So let us know. I'm going to turn the camera around, and we'll get started with the project. Alrighty. So if you're joining in, again, the question of the day is, what do you do when you've created something you love and you can't quite exactly recreate it the way you did the first time? So this is the third of the masks, the fourth one of the set that comes in the total set. My favorite of all time. So the first thing I'm going to do, I wrote a little big note here because I got it into position so that I wouldn't have to set it up on camera, is to rub the paper with your Embossing Buddy. And this is the Embossing Buddy. It's an anti-static, which you use when you're doing heat embossing. And I'm using watercolor paper. So I've lined up my watercolor paper underneath my mask, set it up with some washi tape so that it's held down pretty securely. And then I'm going to go over it with Versamark. So I love this pattern and wanted to do something to really show it off. So you could also, as an alternative to what I'm showing today, you could spray it, with ink that's, or that's in a spritzer bottle and some color. You could sponge over this, although it is a little bit delicate. The method I'm using here, of course, is to heat emboss through those openings. So I'm taking my Versamark pad, and I am going to just grab a piece of paper, and I'm going to hold down, actually, a different piece of paper. I'm going to hold down my mask just a little bit because it's going to want to pull up a little bit because the Versamark is a sticky ink. So we're going to start by pressing it. Now you see how it's pulling up? Now, when I did this the first time, I pressed nice and firmly. And this was one of the steps that I think threw me off when I tried to do it a second time, is I wasn't pressing hard enough when I was pressing my Versamark into the mask. So essentially, this foamy surface, very dirty actually, but it still works, Versamark, I want them to smush into all those openings and get a really solid shape from the mask. So I'm going to go over it like crazy just to make sure I get really good coverage. And then I'm going to go ahead and take that out, and I'm going to heat emboss it with my clear embossing powder. So you probably have some idea of where I'm going with this. Now I have actually heat embossed one ahead of time off camera, so I won't have to do the noisy heating. And there's my heat embossed piece. And the next thing I'm going to do is put my pigment sprinkles on here. Actually, that's not true. I lied. I've got one more step before I do that. So I want to wet the whole surface of this watercolor paper. You can see I've done the back side of that one. A little sneak peek. So I'm going to start with spraying the whole thing. And you can see there's a little bit of color that's those pigment sprinkles, they just kind of spread. They just go everywhere and you don't even realize they're there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the whole surface with a little bit of the sprinkles and do a bit of a watercolor wash over the whole thing. One of the things I found when I did this, ooh, isn't that cool? Oh, my camera is falling. Oh my. Let's see if we can get that fixed. Don't want the camera to fall. And you guys can watch that fun organic movement of the pigment sprinkles. I just love how that looks. Isn't that fun? So one of the pitfalls that I found when I was doing this was getting too much of the pigment sprinkles in any given spot. I'll show you that when I get to another example. So the way to avoid it is to make sure the whole thing is wet and get color everywhere. And then I'm actually going to tap off some of the excess because I don't want it to all be green. You're getting a sneak peek of what the end product's going to look like. Okay, now I'm going to actually put more pigment sprinkles on in a couple different colors. So I like to use this, this is an old pasta tray, and I'm going to spray it a little bit more with some water. And that just helps when you put the pigment sprinkles on, they activate with the water. The two colors I'm using, this one is Bermuda Bay, the one that I sprinkled on to start with. And the second one is Gorgeous Scrape. And I'll show you some examples of ones that I did with some other colors as well. So I'm going to sprinkle on some grape. And then I'm going to go ahead and spray it again and let the color move around and blend. What happens with these two colors is you end up getting spots that essentially turn blue, which I really love, the sort of melding of the colors. You can see it happening sort of in there a little bit, the blue. Now I can actually just stop right here, or I could add more color. But again, as I mentioned earlier, one of the pitfalls in this was that I added too much of the pigment sprinkles, and then they do a funny thing, which I'll show you in just a bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave that the way it is. Now, what you would do is allow it to dry, or you can do something really fun and take a paper towel and just press it over the whole thing, or you can take some other pieces of watercolor paper, maybe your scrap, and I have some that I wanted to show you. Just have to find where I put them. It's so funny. I actually have them like right here on my table, and I can't seem to find them. Okay. The camera seems to be falling again. Not being aggressive enough, tightening things. Okay, so in some of the circumstances when I was playing with something exactly like this, I took a piece of watercolor paper because it's like, okay, that's more color than I want. And I just pressed it against that paper and let it dry, and I got this really super cool background. So that's one example of one that I did. And then did the same thing with my pinks and purples, because I do have a version of this card with pinks and purples. And you could stamp on that or put it in something as a background, covered up with some vellum. Anyway, some super pretty effects with just smushing it against the wet paper. So now what I really want is the shape to show up, and when that dries, it probably will. And I'm going to have some nice highs and lows in the color, which is really fun. Okay, I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to show you one of my finished products. Okay, so here's one of them. And as you can see here, let's see, it's this one turned out really dark. And there are spots in here, I don't know if you can see them, like here where it looks sort of almost yellowish. It's almost like I had too much ink there. Now you can take a paper towel as your surface and spray it. I'm going to go ahead and just do it. And it looks really pretty when it's wet, so I did another thing that I wanted to show you in a sec. And then just take a paper towel and dab up the excess. So I have a piece that's just this right size. This is what I did on one last night. I was playing with it. And it gets just a little bit lighter and pretty, you know, just pretty, so it's not quite as dark, and it shows some of the purples and greens a little bit better. So now, so yes. So anyway, so here's the thing that's funny, right? So I put my paper towel on there and got this really cool little result on my paper towel. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's so pretty. I want to use that. So what I did with one that I did last night was I let it dry, flattened it under something, and then I mounted it to a piece of cardstock. And I thought, well, maybe I'll use that for a card. So the funny things you discover, right, when you're experimenting and playing. So trying to make that one version a little bit lighter, and I ended up with this fun little result. And I could probably dry this same one and cut it down and get something cool looking too, because you have the texture of the paper towel in there also. So let's see, I wanted to show you more. So there's that one, and I want to compare it to another one. So this is another one that I did post paper towel. This is the pattern I did last night. You can see they're both a little bit lighter. Now, I also thought, because it looked so pretty when they were wet, that I would heat emboss over the whole thing with clear embossing powder. And that's what I did on this one. And it's really dark and rich. And I thought the colors would be lighter when I heat embossed with the clear, but they just, you know, showed up really dark. Anyway, it's pretty and different, its own thing, right? So anyway, just some different variations on things that I did. Now, I did also with some of my focal pieces, because one of the pitfalls was, and I'm going to show you, compare these two, was that I wasn't smushing my Versamark into the mask quite deep enough. And you can, if you compare, say, that image, that shape to that shape, this one is much more full than that one. And I really wanted it to be full. So I actually took one that looked like this and I positioned it under my mask a second time before I did my, well, actually it was after I did my color, and did the Versamark smoosh, like Versamark dance. Heat embossed it actually with white embossing powder, and that's what I did on here to get the image or the shape of the mask to show up as more of a solid shape. So those are just, that's one of the lessons that I learned, or options or variables or ways to change things up. So let's go ahead and take my focal piece. I'm going to put my card together, and then I'll show you the other cards that I made as well. So this is a pretty simple layout. Now somebody asked me last week where I get these, and these are really just, you know, leftover backings to various adhesive things that I've used over time. This was the backing for adhesive sheets, but you could use the backing for Stampin' Dimensionals and save those, because they come in handy when you put adhesive on your piece of paper, maybe before you intended to just place it down and be able to easily lift it up. Now you can also buy like little plastic or large plastic sheets, like craft sheets, online that can serve the same purpose, but they're not small like these pieces that I'm using today. So this has adhesive on it. I'm putting it onto a piece of Bermuda Bay cardstock, and I have designed it so that it goes all the way side to side, and it just has a little bit of an edge on the top and bottom. And then I've got two pieces there, two card bodies. I only need one. And then this is just going to go here on the front. And for a design like this, to me, the background, this element here, carries the whole thing. It really doesn't need much of anything else. And then last but not least, I made a little sentiment there using my, I think it's called Vibrant Vases stamp set. I love this. I love that sentiment so much. I share that often. And then I just put that so that it's centered. And then I'll show you my original version is this one. So I put a couple of little rhinestones on either side of that sentiment. And there are my two finished cards. So they're each going to be a little bit different. But again, the major potential pitfalls are, you know, not getting the full image, the full shape of the mask if you don't smush the Versamark in enough. And then, of course, getting too much color and needing to remove some is also another thing to be aware of when you're doing something like this. So let me show you the other projects that I did. So this one was done with the Melon Mambo and Gorgeous Grape ink. And you can see there's some oranges that are showing up in there as well. But those just, you know, these pigment sprinkles just kind of have a mind of their own. Anyway, so this was the second one. And then the third one is this one, which I just love. This one I used Bermuda Bay and Granny Apple Green, the pigment sprinkles. Again, they're here. And then I added the tiniest little bit of the Mango Melody very selectively in a few spots just to give it a few little highlights. So anyway, so again, the question I posed, and I don't know if anybody answered it, but I'll be looking at the comments later. When you create something and it's hard and you are not able to recreate it exactly as you did the first time, what do? Do you can it or do you play? Now, when you play, like I did here, you end up coming up with all kinds of different alternative options and ideas. And that's sort of the fun and the creative play. And it's something that I do when I create technique classes, is I want to do sort of a deep dive. So I look at all the different sort of variables and how to control them, what the pitfalls are. And my goal, of course, is to help people find success in their crafting and inspire them to not just do what I did, but go beyond that and do something more or different or unique to them. So let's see what we got here. Let's see what this looks like. This is the one that's been sitting off to the side. So you can see I've got a lot of the purple is showing up, less of the green. So I might actually go back in there, wet it again, and add some pigment sprinkles. You can see there's a spot. Let's see, I don't want to get this right here. That's sort of too dark. Again, it sort of almost has this greenish yellow look to it. So there's just a little bit too much pigment sprinkles on there. So again, things that you learn along the way. Okay, I'm just going to turn the camera around. So I hope you guys liked those projects, and we'll maybe experiment with the pigment sprinkles yourself. I will say that just the masks themselves and combined with the pigment sprinkles are just, you don't need any ink pads really. Just your masks and your Versamark, or mask in a spritzer bottle. So it's actually a really economical way to apply color to your projects, and it's super fun if you're willing to just play and experiment. So I do have one little announcement, and that is that I am offering some clubs, an online club and a technique club, starting in February. And they both offer the benefits such as free kits, free classes, and I am offering an early bird and also free product as well, as if you were a hostess, but you just get those benefits at the end of the club cycle. So I'm doing an early bird special that ends on Tuesday, February 21st. And you'll get an extra gift if you sign up for one of my clubs. Now, if you've participated in my technique classes during the last session, which was the last half of last year, essentially, I'm also giving that bonus to those people if you signed up for the same or the a la carte options as well, the 3-month or 6-month a la carte options. So all that information is on my website. I will say that I offer a ton of options, maybe too many. The hope is that it satisfied lots of people's interests and needs. But with that said, I think it's a little bit overwhelming in terms of information. So if you look and you're interested, do let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have and clarify things. So I am a detail girl, can't help myself. So again, hope you enjoyed the projects today. I'll be back next Thursday for another Facebook Live at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And go create and play. And thank you so much for joining me today, or for the replay on YouTube or Facebook. Have a great evening. Bye, everybody. Bye.